The dress arrived on a quiet afternoon, folded neatly inside a cream-colored box, tied with a thin silver ribbon. It wasn't my birthday. It wasn't our anniversary. That alone made my heart soften before I even touched it. My husband stood in the doorway, pretending to scroll through his phone, but I could see it, the nervous excitement he was trying to hide. "Open it," he said casually, too casually. When I lifted the lid, my breath caught. The dress was everything I'd never asked for but always dreamed of. Soft, flowing fabric, the color of moonlight, delicate embroidery along the sleeves, elegant but simple me. It felt like he had reached into my soul and pulled out something I didn't know how to explain in words. "You remembered?" I whispered. He looked up then, eyes warm. Of course I did. I didn't ask what he remembered. I didn't need to. Sometimes love speaks in quiet details, like a dress chosen with intention, not obligation. When I tried it on, he watched silently, his gaze heavy with something deeper than admiration, almost like relief, almost like gratitude. That night, I folded the dress carefully and placed it at the back of my wardrobe, saving it for a day that felt worthy. I didn't know that day would never come. A week later, I went to take it out again, just to feel it between my fingers. But the space where it should have been was empty. I searched calmly at first, then desperately, moving hangers, opening drawers, checking every corner like the dress might suddenly appear if I looked hard enough. It didn't. Later that evening, I noticed it. My sister-in-law walked into the living room wearing my dress. She twirled lightly, smiling as if she'd done nothing wrong. "Do you like it?" she asked, adjusting the sleeves. "I borrowed it. Hope you don't mind." Borrowed? The word tasted bitter, but I swallowed it. Family borrows, right? Family crosses lines and expects forgiveness to follow. I forced a smile, nodded, told myself it wasn't worth creating tension. Still, something inside me felt unsettled. She hadn't asked. She never did. That night, when my husband came home, I mentioned it casually while setting the table. "Your sister took the dress you gave me," I said. "She said she borrowed it." The plate slipped slightly in my hand, but I caught it. He didn't respond. I looked up. His back was turned to me, shoulders stiff, hands gripping the edge of the counter. For a second, I thought he hadn't heard me. Then he spoke. And my heart sank. "Oh," he said. Just one word. But his voice cracked. It wasn't anger. It wasn't irritation. It was pain. He cleared his throat, tried again. Did she wear it out?" I nodded slowly. "Yes." "Why?" He didn't answer. Instead, he pressed his palm against the counter, as if grounding himself. The silence between us grew heavy, suffocating. "I should have told you," he murmured, almost to himself. "Told me what?" I asked gently, fear creeping into my chest. He turned around then, and I saw it. The guilt, the hurt, the regret swimming in his eyes. "This wasn't about a dress. It never was. That dress," he said quietly, "wasn't just a gift." My stomach tightened. "I picked it because it meant something. Because I wanted it to be yours. Only yours." His voice broke again, this time completely. And in that moment, as I stood there watching the man I loved struggle to breathe through unspoken memories, I realized something painful and undeniable. The dress wasn't missing. Trust was. And whatever my sister-in-law had taken that day, it wasn't just fabric. It was the first tear in a story that was about to unravel. The next morning, the house felt heavier, as if the walls themselves had heard what wasn't said the night before. My husband left early for work, quieter than usual, kissing my forehead like he was apologizing for something he still didn't know how to explain. I stood at the doorway long after he was gone, holding the echo of his broken voice in my chest. By afternoon, my sister-in-law came over again. She walked in with that same effortless confidence, the kind that made people excuse her behavior before she ever had to ask. The dress was folded over her arm now, returned without ceremony, without shame. She placed it on the couch as if it were nothing more than a borrowed scarf. "There," she said lightly. "I didn't get any stains on it." I thanked her because that's what I'd been trained to do. Be polite, be understanding, keep the peace. But when I picked up the dress, I noticed the faint smell of perfume that wasn't mine. A sharp, lingering reminder that something intimate had been invaded. She watched me carefully. "You don't mind, right?" she asked, smiling sweetly. "You never wear these kinds of things anyway." The words were gentle. The meaning was not. I smiled back, my lips tight. It was a gift. So she laughed. "We're family, family." Again, that word used like a shield. As she talked, I began noticing things I'd ignored for years. How she always sat closer to my husband than necessary. How she spoke over me in conversations. How she borrowed my things but never offered her own. Small cuts, one after another, dismissed as misunderstandings. That evening, I folded the dress again, slower this time. My fingers traced the embroidery, and I finally asked myself why my husband had looked like he'd lost something precious. When he came home, I didn't mention his sister. I waited. We ate in near silence until he finally pushed his plate away. "She's always been like that," he said suddenly, taking things, claiming them. I looked up, surprised. He rarely spoke ill of his family. "There was a time," he continued, staring at his hands, "when I thought losing things was normal, easier than fighting. My heart ached." "What did you lose?" I asked. He hesitated, then stood and walked to the window. The city lights reflected in the glass, blurring his face. "The dress," he said quietly, "was like fixing a mistake. I didn't interrupt a long time ago." He went on. "She took something important from someone I cared about. I didn't stop her. I convinced myself it wasn't worth the conflict." His voice dropped. "I promised myself I'd never do that again, that I'd protect what was mine." Something shifted inside me. The dress wasn't about beauty or surprise. It was about redemption, about choosing me when once he hadn't chosen someone else. "And now," I asked softly, "now I feel like I failed again." I crossed the room and took his hands. "She didn't take it because you failed," I said. "She took it because she thought she could." That night, I lay awake replaying every interaction I'd ever had with her. The compliments that felt like comparisons, the laughter that came at my expense, the way she wore my things better, louder, as if daring me to object. And I understood the truth I'd been avoiding. Her smile wasn't kindness, it was ownership. The next day, she posted photos online. There she was, wearing the dress at a gathering, glowing under compliments that weren't meant for her. Comments flooded in, hearts, praise, admiration. My chest tightened, but this time, something else rose with the pain. Clarity. She hadn't just borrowed a dress. She'd borrowed attention, validation, and power. Things she believed belonged to her by right. And for the first time since the dress arrived in that silver-ribboned box, I didn't feel small. I felt awake. Whatever wound my husband carried, whatever line his sister had crossed, I knew one thing for certain now: this wasn't an accident. And I would not pretend it was. The photos stayed on her page for days. Every time I opened my phone, there she was, smiling, glowing, wrapped in a dress that was never meant to hold her story. Friends commented things like "stunning" and "perfect for you," and each word felt like another quiet insult. She never tagged me, never mentioned where the dress came from. It was as if she had erased me from the picture entirely. At first, I told myself not to care, but the truth has a way of demanding attention. At a family dinner that weekend, she wore the dress again, this time in front of everyone. She entered the room like she was making an announcement, pausing just long enough for eyes to land on her. I felt my husband tense beside me, his jaw tightening, his hand gripping mine under the table. "Oh, that's a beautiful dress," his mother said warmly. "Thank you, my sister-in," Law replied, smiling. "It suits me, doesn't it?" The words settled like dust in my lungs. No one corrected her. No one asked. And I understood then how she'd learned to take without permission, because silence had always protected her. When she leaned toward me and whispered, "You really should wear brighter things more often," I felt something snap. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough. I stood up slowly. The room went quiet, forks pausing mid-air. "It was a gift," I said, my voice calm but steady, "from my husband to me." Her smile faltered for half a second. Then she laughed. "Oh, don't be so sensitive. I already told you I borrowed it. Borrowed things are returned," I thought. Borrowed things aren't claimed. My husband stood then, too. "I chose that dress because it reminded me of my wife," he said, his voice trembling but strong. "Not you." The air shifted, eyes widened. My sister-in-law's laughter faded, replaced by something sharper, offense. "I didn't know it was such a big deal," she snapped. "It's just a dress." He looked at her, pain etched into his face. "It was never just a dress. We left early that night. In the car, the silence was unbearable until it finally broke into tears. "I'm sorry," he said, gripping the steering wheel. "I should have stopped this years ago." I reached for him. "You're stopping it now." That night, he told me everything, about how she had always crossed boundaries, about how she took credit for his achievements, about how she once ruined a relationship by spreading lies, and how he'd chosen peace over truth. I thought ignoring it made me kind, he whispered, but it just made her bolder. I listened, heart aching not just for him but for myself. For all the moments I'd stayed quiet, thinking patience was strength, the next day I made a decision. I didn't message her, I didn't argue online, I didn't demand apologies. I planned. I posted a photo instead, not of myself wearing the dress, but of the box it came in. The silver ribbon, my husband's handwritten note tucked inside, to my wife, because some things should only belong where they are loved. No names, no accusations. The reactions were immediate. Questions followed, confusion, then understanding. She called me that evening, furious. "How dare you embarrass me?" she shouted. I smiled softly. "I didn't embarrass you. I told the truth." She hung up. For the first time, I slept peacefully. The breaking point wasn't loud or cruel. It didn't involve revenge born of rage. It was the moment I chose dignity over silence. And somewhere between truth and calm resolve, I realized something powerful. I didn't need to fight her. She was already losing. Because the one thing she could never take, no matter how hard she tried, was what my husband and I had chosen together each other. The dress came back to me quietly. No announcement, no apology. Just a package left at our door one morning, folded carefully, as if someone hoped neatness could undo intent. I stood there for a long moment, the weight of it in my hands heavier than fabric should ever be. My husband watched me from the kitchen. "You don't have to keep it," he said gently. "We can let it go." I shook my head. "No, I want to decide what it means now." That was the difference. For the first time, I chose. A week later, we attended a family event. I wore the dress not to prove anything, not to compete, but because it belonged to me. The fabric felt softer against my skin, like it had forgiven me for doubting myself. When I entered the room, conversations paused. Compliments came quietly, respectfully. No exaggeration, no spectacle. My sister-in-law sat across the room, dressed plainly, her smile tight. She didn't look at me, but I could feel her discomfort. Attention had shifted not because I demanded it, but because authenticity has a way of reclaiming space. She approached me later, voice low. "I didn't know you'd wear it again." "I didn't either," I replied calmly. "But some things are worth taking back." She searched my face for anger. She didn't find any. That unsettled her more than shouting ever could. From that day on, boundaries became visible, not dramatic, just firm. Borrowing stopped, comments softened. Distance grew, and with it, clarity. My husband changed too. He spoke up more, corrected stories, claimed his voice in rooms where he'd once stayed silent. Watching him was like watching someone finally breathe after years underwater. One evening, as we folded laundry together, he held the dress for a moment before handing it to me. "You know," he said, "when I bought this, I was scared." "Of what?" "Of choosing differently than I used to, of protecting something instead of letting it be taken." I smiled. "You did choose differently," he nodded, "and so did you." That was the sweetest part of the revenge, not watching her lose, but realizing I had won something far greater. Peace. The dress no longer symbolized pain or betrayal. It became proof that love doesn't shrink to keep others comfortable. Proof that silence isn't kindness when it costs yourself worth. Proof that grace can be powerful without being passive. My sister-in-law never apologized. She didn't have to. Her power had faded the moment I stopped handing it to her. Months later, I wore the dress again. This time on a quiet evening out with my husband. No audience. No tension, just us, laughing softly under city lights. He reached for my hand and squeezed it. "I'm proud of you," he said. "For what?" "For knowing your worth." I leaned into him, feeling steady, whole, because sweet revenge isn't loud. It doesn't scream or destroy. Sometimes it simply looks like reclaiming what was always yours, your voice, your dignity, your love, and walking forward without looking back. And as the night wrapped around us, I realized something beautiful. The dress had never been the gift. The gift was becoming someone no one could take from again, smiling.